In the second half of Wuthering Waves 2.1, Kuro has released the third limited 5-star male character, Brant, who from my experience seems to be a very strong support character who brings a lot of damage to the table on his own. So in this video, I want to go over his kit, talk about his sequences and signature weapon, different ways that you can build him including stats that you should be aiming for, the teams that you can run him in, and finally my thoughts on Brant including some tips and tricks for the character I've found, and if he's worth pulling for. So let's get started with his kit. Brant's basic attack chain is a 4-part combo that consists of grappling, sword slashes, and pistol shots. The pistol shots from stage 2 and stage 3 are medium range shots that typically hit enemies within lock-on range, but won't reach enemies outside of it. The grapple in stage 3 and 4 will only grapple a short distance, and enemies too far away will be missed by the following attacks. If you use a heavy attack after stage 2 or 4 of the basic combo, Brant will do a special heavy attack called Rhapsodic Riff, where he will grapple to the enemy and reposition behind them doing a slash. The normal version of his heavy attack can be used by holding down the attack button from idle, after using Rhapsodic Riff, or after landing from a plunge attack. Brant's dodge counter is a stronger version of his basic attack 3, grappling to the enemy to do a sword slash and pistol combo. This attack will chain into his basic attack 4. This summarizes most of his ground moves, however 90% of the time, Brant doesn't want to be on the ground and instead will be in the air. So let's talk about his aerial attacks. When Brant is suspended in the air, he has a 4-part basic attack combo where he will grapple and swing towards an enemy to perform aerial attacks. There are 2 different ways that you can perform this combo. First is the regular tap combo, where Brant will attack the target with quick burst attacks. The final part of this combo will have Brant dash towards the enemy, slashing through them and onto the ground. This can be followed up with his special heavy attack. However, for the stage 1 and 2 of this combo, if the button is held down, he will perform an extended spin attack lasting for a short duration, or until the button is released where he will flip away. Something to note here, if the target gets too far away during the spin combo will break prematurely and Brant will flip away. There are a couple of things to talk about with his mid-air attacks. After each stage of his combo, Brant will perform a backflip attack, which will have him do a slash flipping backwards into the air, followed by a quick pistol shot. This won't trigger after stage 4 of the mid-air combo because Brant will no longer be in the air. Another thing to mention about the backflips is they will reset Brant's aerial dodge ability, allowing you to dodge more than once while airborne. If stage 1 of the mid-air combo misses the target or was cast from too far away, he will do a slash attack instead of the stage 1 combo. This will fail the combo and will not lead into stage 2, instead changing his next basic attack into a plunge attack. If you accidentally tap the basic attack button instead of holding it down during the stage 1 and stage 2, you have a short period of time to reapply the attack button and trigger the spin attack. This is hit and miss with stage 1 as it's a very fast attack, but stage 2 is very easy to get this to trigger. So with that out of the way, let's talk about his skill. The normal ground version of his skill will have him do a slash attack jumping backwards into the air, followed by a pistol shot. This skill has a cooldown of 4 seconds and will leave Brant suspended in the air to do his mid-air combo. While mid-air, Brant's skill will change into his plunge attack, positioning him back down towards the ground with a slash attack. As this is a plunge attack, this doesn't have a cooldown being always available when airborne and is considered as basic attack damage. The last version of his skill is his hardest hitting attack called Returned from Ashes. When Brant has full Forte energy, his skill will change into an enhanced skill which will do a triple spin towards the target before launching into the air and crashing down to the ground on a massive anchor, dealing equally massive damage. This has a rather long cast time, will generate a shield for each nearby resonator at the start of the attack, with the shield scaling off Brant's energy regen. It can be cast mid-air, and the damage is considered as basic attack damage. Something to mention about the shield, each character in the team gets their own unique shield from it. So if one character takes damage to their shield, it doesn't deplete the shield on the other characters. This shield will last up to 30 seconds, and this enhanced skill does not have a cooldown. So let's talk about his Forte ability itself, as it has some important things to mention. This ability will passively give 12 attack for every 1% energy regen he has over 150%, stacking up to an additional 1560 attack. The amount of energy regen required to max this out is equal to 130% energy regen over the original 150% threshold, which is a total of 280% energy regen. The second passive of Brant's Forte is he will heal all nearby resonators for each quarter of Brant's Forte gauge filled. He has these little indicators on his Forte gauge that will light up once triggered. The last thing that I want to touch on with his Forte is all of Brant's attacks will generate Forte gauge, including his intro skill, with the only exceptions being his enhanced skill and his liberation, which we'll talk about next. Brant's liberation will have him ride on an anchor as it swings and slams into the target while healing the team. This doesn't do as much damage as it looks like it should, however this ability is very important for Brant's kit and we'll talk about why. After casting Liberation, Brant will enter the Aflame state. While in the Aflame state, the attack bonus provided from his Forte ability is increased from 12 attack to 20 attack for every 1% of energy regen over 150%. This has a maximum of 2,600 attack, which massively boosts Brant's damage. He will also get double the amount of Forte gauge when performing attacks, allowing you to get to his hard-hitting enhanced skill rather quickly and doing some quick team healing at the same time. The Aflame state will either end after 12 seconds or after the final hit of Brant's enhanced skill. The Aflame state doesn't end if Brant is switched off the field, allowing him to be played in a quick swap team if that's how you like to play, but also allowing you to swap cancel his enhanced skill and still receive its damage buff. His Liberation can not only be cast mid-air, but it will also leave him mid-air as well, allowing you to go straight into his mid-air combo. However, one important thing to mention, it will remember what part of the mid-air combo you were in and won't reset it. His Liberation has a cooldown of 24 seconds. His intro skill will have him swing into the target, generating a small amount of Forte before doing a backflip attack. The amount of Forte generated from this is about a quarter of his Forte gauge if you include the backflip. This will also leave him mid-air, and provided you don't go to ground, can be followed up with his mid-air stage 2 attack. Brant's outro skill is not a damage skill and instead amplifies the incoming resonator with 20% fusion damage and 25% skill damage. This buff will end after 14 seconds or if the incoming resonator is switched out. Brant's first inherent skill will give 20% increased healing to Brant's Forte, and his second inherent skill gives resistance to interruption during mid-air attacks, and also gives 15% fusion damage bonus. Something to mention here, the interruption resistance only applies to his mid-air basic attack combo, and does not apply to abilities that can be cast mid-air, such as his enhanced skill. However, the 15% fusion damage bonus is a passive bonus that doesn't just apply to his mid-air attacks. That's his kit. So let's move on and talk about his sequences and his weapon. His first sequence will add an effect to his enhanced skill, causing enemies to freeze while it's being cast. It also increases Brant's damage dealt by 20% for 5 seconds after casting his intro skill or doing a backflip and stacking up to 3 times. This is a very strong sequence and will make his enhanced skill a lot easier to get off if you're trying to solo, and it can also give a small damage opening to the incoming resonator. For his second sequence, his mid-air attacks and his enhanced skill have their crit rate increased by a massive 30%. His outro skill also gains a new effect that will have Brant launch an extra explosion attack when the incoming resonator uses their skill. This lasts for 20 seconds, can occur once per second, and has a limit of 2 explosions before the ability wears off. It's a little bit unclear if this ability only applies to the incoming resonator, or if it can be transferred to the next character if both explosions aren't triggered. It's also unclear how large the AoE of the explosions are, so if you're considering this sequence and those are some things you want to know, be sure to find some players with this sequence already unlocked to find out. However, this seems to be a very strong sequence overall. His third sequence increases the damage multiplier of his enhanced skill by 42%. The fourth will increase the shield obtained from his enhanced skill by 20%, and will also have the ability heal the whole team when it's used, with the healing scaling off Brant's energy regen. His 5th sequence is a 15% basic attack damage bonus for 10 seconds whenever Brant deals basic attack damage. This will likely have 100% uptime as the vast majority of his kit deals basic attack damage. Finally, his 6th sequence increases the damage multiplier of all mid-air attacks by 30%, and his enhanced skill will deal an extra blast of damage equal to 30% of the original enhanced skill's total damage. Now moving on to his weapon, it is of course tailored towards him, giving 77% energy regen on the substat, with the passive giving 8 to 16% crit rate, 24 to 48% basic attack bonus for 10 seconds after casting Liberation, and 24 to 48% basic attack bonus for 4 seconds when dealing basic attack damage. Now, this weapon is insanely strong on Brant, really cranking up his damage output. However, it's far too niche to recommend pulling for. The only reasons I would recommend pulling for this weapon is if you like soloing content, which he can be really good at, or if you want to try running Brant as your main DPS, which he can absolutely do with this weapon. And lastly, if you really like Brant and just want to push his damage as far as you can. However, just know that the likelihood of this weapon being valuable on other characters is highly unlikely, and you'd be better suited pulling for multiple copies of Emerald of Genesis with your standard pulls, for the crit rate substat, and for the passive that gives energy regen and attack boost. But in terms of which is better to pull for, would I recommend his sequences or his weapon? For power, his weapon is easily the best choice, giving him a massive damage bonus and will make building him a hell of a lot easier. And even though it is an incredibly niche weapon, it can also be transferred onto other characters that might want energy regen in future, whereas sequences can't. However, if you plan to run Brant in a more supportive role, then the Stagnate from his Sequence 1 could be more useful to your team, and if you have a single copy of Overture, you can get some pretty respectable damage for a lot less resource investment. And lastly, if you have the means to do so, getting his weapon and either his S2 or S3 is a really good stopping point. You really shouldn't need any more damage than what he can provide at this level of investment. Now, in terms of builds, there are a few builds I'd recommend aiming for. If you have his weapon, then you should try to be on the Tidebreaker set with 1 energy regen and 1 fusion bonus main stats on your 3 costs. And for these substats, aim for 250 energy regen minimum. After that, your next priority would be crit rate and damage, with the 4 cost echoes main stat making up for whichever you have less of, and trying to get that 1:2 ratio. However, if you like crit fishing, then go for more crit damage. Lastly, if you can somehow swing it, basic attack bonus and attack percent, with basic attack bonus giving better scaling. If you don't want to get his weapon, you have a few paths to pick from. You can try to make him deal the most damage while still being good at healing and shielding your team. For this option, you'd want to use Overture, as it would provide the most energy regen. Don't be fooled by this being a 4-star weapon. If you build Brant correctly, this can be a very strong option. You want to run the Tidebreaker set again, with 2 energy regen main stat 3 costs, and as for the substats, the priority is exactly the same as the first build, with the big priority to get 250% ER minimum. If you don't care about buffing his healing and shielding, you can run him on any of the other 5-star weapons in the game. My pick would be Emerald of Genesis, as it shouldn't be that hard to get more copies over time, and the damage bonus at Refinement 5 is pretty significant. For this build, it will be very difficult for you to get enough energy regen for the Tidebreaker set, so stick with Molten Rift. You want to run 2 energy regen 3 costs, with your substat priority being as much energy regen, crit rate, and crit damage as you can, ideally getting an average roll for each on all 5 of your echoes, and lastly, basic attack bonus, followed by attack percent. The last set that I would recommend is the trusty Moonlit set, but only if your goal with Brant is to hyper buff your main DPS such as Chung-Li, Trisha, or Carlotta. If this is what you want to do, then I would recommend Overture to give the extra Concerto energy, and for the energy regen on the substat. On a pure buffer build, energy regen is the most important stat for Brant to give your main DPS the biggest shield you can. And after that, you can try to get crit rate and crit damage, then basic attack bonus and attack percent where you can. As for the sets that I wouldn't recommend but you can still do if you really want to, you can put him on Rejuvenating Glow, but he's better suited to be a sub DPS buffer than the pure healer role. And the second one you can put him on is the Lingering Tune set, but this is honestly awful for him because it gives attack percent, and because of how much attack he gets from his energy regen, this is actually his worst scaling stat. So with the sets out of the way, what echoes should you run in his main slot? If you're on the Tidebreaker set, the obvious choice is Dragon of Dirge. It can be cast mid-air, so it has very little chance of interrupting your rotation. It launches up into the air, helping you avoid some attacks, and it gives the two most useful damage bonuses for Brant, being Fusion Damage bonus and Basic Attack bonus, for just having it equipped in the main slot. If you are on the Molten Rift set, you have two options, which are both Inferno Riders. The best choice for ease of use is the Nightmare version because it gives fusion damage bonus and skill damage bonus for just having it equipped in the main slot, meaning you don't need to fit its skill into your rotation if you don't want to, and it can also be cast mid-air. However, Brant can't take full advantage of the skill damage bonus, so if you want the most damage out of the Molten Rift set, the original Inferno Rider is the better pick. It gives fusion damage bonus and basic attack bonus. However, the downside is you need to hit an enemy with the final strike of the Echo ability to get it, and it can only be cast while on the ground. This means Brant must go to ground in order to cast it, and if the final meteor strike misses, you won't get the damage bonus. This isn't that big of a deal, and if you want to go with this option, I would suggest switching to Brant from your healer before they reach full Concerto energy to use the Inferno Rider combo. Do the full combo quick swapping back to your healer during the meteor animation, buff your team, and then swap back to Brant. This should be long enough for the buff to last for Brant's full rotation. However, personally, I would still pick the Nightmare version just for the convenience of using it and because it can be cast mid-air. But both options are solid for the Molten Rift set. Lastly, if you decide on a Moonlit build, Heron is the obvious choice to buff your hypercarry DPS. Now, let's quickly talk about team options for Brant and where he shines. As a fusion and skill damage amplifier, Brant can act as the sub DPS in most teams with either a fusion or skill damage dealing main DPS. Some good options currently are Carlotta, Chisha, and Chung-Li, with Chung-Li gaining massive damage output from Brant's buffs. But a damage amplifier is not all Brant is limited to. As he provides both shields and healing to the team, he can fulfill the healer slot as well. Some team options include mono fusion DPS teams consisting of Chisha, Chung-Li, and Brant, and also duo teams with Brant acting as both the healer and the sub DPS buffer. The best option for this, in my opinion, is with Chung-Li, as Brant can amplify Chung-Li and Chung-Li can amplify Brant. One thing to mention about the Chung-Li Brant duo team though, is if you swap cancel Brant's enhanced skill, Chung-Li's amplification buff will fall off before the ability can take advantage of it. So if you're going to do this, be sure to swap to Chung-Li after the anchor hits the ground. That being said, Chisha and Carlotta duo teams will work as well, with Carlotta's team being a lot of fun from my experience. However, another team option for Brant is he has a lot of damage potential himself, making it an option to run him as the main DPS in a basic attack team. For this you can run Brant, a sub DPS basic attack buffer like Sanhua, and any healer to provide team-wide buffs. Brant is very much a jack of all trades, making him very flexible with many different team combinations available to him. So with that out of the way, what are his best teams? The best and most fun team I thought of was Shorekeeper, Brant, and Chung-Li, but you can swap out Shorekeeper for Verena and Chung-Li with Chisha or Carlotta. Shorekeeper being the best current healer in the game boosts this team's damage significantly. Brant is a great choice for the second stage of Shorekeeper's Stellar Realm, taking up very little field time during his rotation and building Concerto, and his hardest hitting ability is perfect to swap cancel into Chung-Li, getting the crit damage bonus from the Stellar Realm Stage 3, while giving fusion and skill damage amplify to Chung-Li. Chung-Li can quickly burst through her abilities, doing massive damage very quickly, and once she's done, she can give a Liberation damage amp to Shorekeeper for her enhanced intro skill. This is a very cookie cutter team, it's very quick to get used to, and will rotate fairly quickly, leaving plenty of time for more skillful moves such as dodging or parrying if need be. That is mostly everything to do with Brant. So what are my thoughts on him? I originally wasn't going to pull for Brant. When it comes to characters that I like, they tend to be characters that have a certain cool factor like Jian, Chun-Li, or Shang Liao, but Brant's design didn't really appeal to me. However, I quickly changed my mind once I got to try him in his trial, with his style of combat growing on me pretty quickly. So my opinion of Brant now is he is a very strong character in full teams, duo teams, and solo play. However, he has a few issues that I don't like. I don't like the fact that he's a character designed to be airborne but only gets one mid-air dodge. Yes, it can be reset with a flip, but there are certain boss attack combos where even that is not enough, plus the fact that the normal mid-air dodge sucks to start with. Another problem is being on the ground isn't that much better. You generate next to no forte, you deal less damage, and your dodge counter ability leaves Brant very vulnerable to follow-up attacks, as its animation is fairly long, and it animation locks you, but doesn't give you iframes for even half of its duration. He also has general usage issues, like if an enemy dies while he's moving towards them during his stage 1 or stage 2 mid-air combos, this will prevent the hit from landing and stops the combo. Bosses that move around a lot can be frustrating to get the combo started as well. His liberation doesn't give you iframes for the full animation lock duration, leaving you vulnerable against some fast attacks, and it can very easily miss enemies that are still within lock-on range and attack nothing if you get too high in the air. However, this problem can be fixed if you just lock onto the enemy to make sure it lands. So even though he's a strong character, he's very frustrating in some content. Having said that, there are also a lot of things I really like about him as well. He is a fantastic teammate for fusion and skill damage characters, taking very little field time with a simple and easy rotation. He is very fun to use in the open world, giving you massive amounts of survivability to the point where he's now my favorite character to use when farming with 2 underleveled characters, and watching his enhanced skill nuke a pack of enemies never really got old. He's already doing a boatload of damage even without me taking full advantage of his set's 5-piece bonus or his energy regen scaling attack boost, and he is incredibly difficult to get killed, protecting both himself and your team with healing and shields. So overall, he's a bit of a mixed bag. But before we get to my pull recommendations, let's talk about some of the more interesting things that I found with Brant. Despite what I said earlier, Brant's backflip is incredibly strong at avoiding a lot of attacks in the game, which is why I suspect they didn't give him a better air dodge. However, because it doesn't give you iframes and only distances you from the enemy, there are instances in the game where this ability will fall short of making him a proper mid-air character. So a lot of the time you can get away with letting Brant move away from the enemy naturally, but also be prepared for some more bullshit attacks just in case. The plunge attack is mostly useful for positioning back down to the ground, however it does have another use. When you are performing mid-air attacks, they have a soft animation lock that will prevent you from dodging during certain parts. However, you can use the plunge attack to cancel mid-air attacks in progress, and since you're able to dodge cancel a plunge attack, you can use this to get out of bad positions. Now, this can be pretty useful on its own, but cancelling your abilities like this has the side effect of also resetting the mid-air attack combo stage. This opens the door for potential combos you can perform and allows you to take advantage of different openings in different ways, with the only downside being the more you do this, the more stamina it will use. A cool combo that I found was if you cancel the stage 2 attack, it can reset you back to stage 1, allowing you to perform the full combo again, and if you do all 4 spin combos, this can generate enough forte to fill the gauge in one go. This isn't really useful to most people as Brant's team rotation is already nice and short. However, if you're looking to style with Brant, this could be something to consider. Speaking of styling, Brant's dodge counter and basic attack 3 leave him suspended in the air and can be used to avoid some low to the ground attacks. This isn't really that useful on a character that already wants to be mid-air, but it can be useful for when you have to go back down to the ground or even for extra style points. His normal ground skill is actually pretty decent at parrying attacks, and his enhanced skill is really strong as well. However, he has a really strong parrying attack that he can use from the ground by just jumping and pressing basic attack. This will perform a grapple gap closer for the stage 1 mid-air attack, which when it collides with an enemy, as long as you aren't holding down the attack button to perform the spin combo, it will immediately launch you away from the enemy, keeping you at a safe distance while parrying the attack. This can be very useful against dashing parries like Heron's Swoop, Tempest Dash, or Fallacy's Quick Punch, provided your timing is good. Brant can pretty easily do 2 mid-air swing attacks by doing a dash in between. However, if you use a transform echo like Nightmare Inferno Rider or Dragon of Dirge that can be cast in the air, this will also reset your dodge, allowing you to dodge cancel out of the echo skill and perform a 3rd mid-air swing. This can be pretty strong in getting to some hard to reach places, especially with Dragon of Dirge. While we're talking about the Dragon of Dirge, I found the best time to use this ability is to cast it straight after either his intro skill or enhanced skill. Then once it gets to the top of its launch, dash out of the ability and use your liberation. This allows most of the damage from the Echo ability to hit the enemies within range without needing to worry about them teleporting or moving out of the range, as during the liberation, the enemies will be frozen in place. This next one might be a bug, but in case it isn't, the damage from Brant's enhanced skill can linger for a short period of time after it hits the ground, hitting enemies that enter into its radius afterwards. Where this is useful to some players, depending on your ping, is in wave-based content like Whimpering Wastes. If you can use his enhanced skill and it kills a wave of enemies, because the damage lingers for a short period of time, the damage can also hit the next wave of enemies as well. Where this gets really interesting is you can prolong this effect even further by using another character's liberation or ability that stops time. If Brant's skill is doing enough damage to kill a wave of enemies, this can hit multiple waves of enemies in one go. Now, I imagine most people won't be able to take full advantage of this, as to actually use this, you need to be doing massive amounts of reliable damage, but if you do have that damage, I imagine you could pull off some pretty good scores in Whimpering Wastes. Because of how high Brant's attack can scale off his energy recharge, if you're trying to boost Brant's damage in a team, you'd be better off running Bell instead of Fallacy on your healer, because it gives damage bonus instead of attack percent. This does have the requirement of not taking 3 hits, otherwise you'll lose the damage buff from Bell, so if you're not confident at avoiding attacks or you don't have a Bell built, just use Fallacy instead. And lastly, a point I made earlier was if you have Chun-Li amplified Brant, Brant should stay on the field instead of swap cancelling his enhanced skill, because otherwise the amplified bonus will fall off before he can do massive damage. The same applies to Chun-Li. If you want to get the maximum damage bonus from Brant, you should try to stay on field until she finishes casting her enhanced heavy attack instead of swap cancelling it, if you want to get the full benefit from Brant's buffs. So would I recommend pulling for Brant? If you're a Chun-Li main, you should absolutely pull for him. He is her best teammate we're likely to see for a while and will massively improve Chun-Li's performance. If you like unique playstyles, Brant is a great option to pull for, having a more unique playstyle than most other characters currently. And if you're looking for a strong teammate, even at S0 with a 4-star weapon, he is an incredibly strong choice. But if you're a solo player, I think there are better characters that you could pull for. I personally regret pulling him to solo with, however I'm ultimately glad I did get him because of how valuable he is in a team. Overall, I think Brant is worth pulling. Now, I'm still going to solo the holograms with him, and I've basically soloed all of them at this point. However, I'm going to wait to make the solo video for him for when I actually have a complete build on him. At the moment, he is hitting really hard, but I want to try and get around 70% crit rate, 240% crit damage, and about 255 to 260 energy regen. Once I get those sort of stats or better, that should be enough to showcase his potential. However, that will do it for the video. I hope this was able to give you an idea of what sort of character Brant is and how he plays, but mostly I hope you're able to get something useful out of the video. If you did, you can leave a like or a comment, and if you'd like to see more content in future, you can subscribe to the channel. But that will do it from me, so I hope to see you in the next video, and I'll catch you later.